Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Midnight Monster Corner podcast. I'm your host, as always, Corey, and alongside me is my good pal, Tony. What's going on, Tony?
What's going on?
What's happening, brother?
Not much,
All right.
brother. We're excited about this one.
Yes. Subgenres. So that's what this one's about, everyone. Subgenres. So if you don't know what subgenre is, basically you have this genre that everyone loves in this channel called horror films, and then amongst horror films, you have subgenres, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So, Tony, let's get started on this bet. Well, first of all, before we get into the main subject, let's did you pick up anything throughout the week?
The only thing I ended up picking up this week, man, was that I went to Wally World because I heard they had the Screen Factory put out the Fly collection, and I heard some people were finding it at Walmart, so I wanted to try my luck. I went up there and tooled around for a little bit. Didn't find it, unfortunately, but I did find the new Big Trouble in Little China Screen Factory Blu-ray. So I picked that up because it wasn't bad. The price wasn't bad at all. So I just had to snag it because that's like my favorite non-horror John Carpenter film. So
Hmm.
I had to grab that, and sure enough, I snagged that and a couple other films for the kids. But that was the one for me. That was the only thing I picked up this week so far. But how about
Right.
yourself? Did you pick up anything?
So you know what? Actually, I did the same exact thing you did. I actually went with the mindset of I was going to pick up the Fly box set and the Omen box set because I heard both of them were there. Um, and actually, I had been to a couple of them looking around, and honestly just couldn't find it anywhere. But I did end up finding two movies that I didn't have in the collection that were pretty dirt cheap. Actually, I got Hellfest, just because
Oh,
I had just done um, Bloodfest, so I was like, why not? There I go. It's only $5, so you can't beat that for $5. And then the other one I actually surprisingly got from Walmart for $3, and that was The Mist.
oh,
So
nice.
yeah, I haven't. I didn't have it in the collection, and like I even when I picked it up off the shelf, I told Kelsey, I was like, "Oh, you got to watch this movie," and she was like, "Yeah." I was like, "It's got the most fucked up ending."
Really does, man.
So yeah, it does.
Those are
But
two good pickups, man. I'm really a big fan of that Hellfest movie. I actually got to see it in theaters, which is pretty cool. I like the aesthetic, and I know a lot of people, a lot of people don't like that film. I just don't understand why. I thought it was pretty neat. I thought it was pretty good. So that's a good pickup, man. And of course, The Mist goes, The Mist is an excellent, excellent film. So you got two
it
good
really
pickups.
is.
Yeah, no doubt.
I was actually in a deep discussion with a guy at work, and he was talking about The Mist, and I guess he's like more of a closet horror fan, I guess you would say.
Yeah, there's
he
some.
he talk he talks to me about horror films like crazy. Um, but we were talking about this film, and he was like talking about how it was like basically 2 minutes into the film, and already you could see like people like plotting against one another in this grocery store and stuff. And I was like, well, it just goes to show you, you put humans in a situation, and how long can they actually last before they start fighting against one another to survive?
Absolutely, man. That's one of the concepts of that movie I actually really love is how quick people can pit against each other, and when it comes to their survival, it's all about you know their will bends to the will of somebody that's mentally stronger and can prey on the weak. So it really is fascinating, especially when it comes to like religion and stuff like that. How people can just basically just bend to the will of the strongest minded person, and just do exactly what they want, and pretty much create like a cult. So that's one of the most fascinating things about that movie. I really do enjoy that.
Yeah, yeah,
Really.
I was ready to revisit it. All right, well, that's gonna be it for that. You ready to jump into this?
Well, I was going to ask you, man, did you watch anything interesting this week?
Honestly, the only thing that I watched was I watched that spaghetti western from Lucio Fulci,
Oh,
um,
Massacre.
Massacre Time. Yeah, that was pretty fun. Um, For a 1966 film, I believe it was 1966. It was pretty fun. It had, they haven't had like a classic Lucio Fulci plot twist to it and everything, so it was really cool. I enjoyed
Nice.
it.
Yeah, I gotta seek that out and watch it, man. That's one Fulci I haven't got a chance to see. I've pretty much checked out his whole filmography almost, except for a handful of things, and that's one of them. So
Well,
I'm gonna be on the lookout for that.
supposedly he had three spaghetti westerns that he did, and that was one of them. I believe that was the first one that he did.
Okay,
So,
I can't
but
believe he
yeah,
did.
yeah, I think he did three, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe he could have done more, but I'm pretty sure he did three.
No. He's got
Yeah,
such a extensive filmography, man. He's done just about everything, but of course, the most people know him for his horror films, and his Gates of Hell trilogy is cemented you know, in the lore of fandom. So,
oh
you
yeah,
know, he's done it so much. He's done comedy, he's done westerns. It's remarkable how much he's been able to accomplish in his career.
yeah, yeah. It's definitely awesome.
Hell yeah, dude.
So, and which one of my favorites that we actually sat down together to watch was Touch of Death. You remember that one?
How can I forget that one?
that, that
Man,
fucking hammer.
that movie is insane. It's been a long time. I think the last time I watched it was when we watched it together. I really need to pop that one back in and give it another watch.
Yeah,
It's been long, man.
I think I'm gonna check that one out again. Do you have it?
I do. Got
Okay,
the Shriek Show DVD.
nice. Yeah, yeah. I picked it up. I picked it up with you actually. We were at a little place called Manifest that don't exist anymore.
Sadly, does not exist anymore. You're right.
Sad. Well, it does
Yeah.
exist in. There's one in Greenville, isn't there?
Um.
One in
There's
Greenville and Charlotte.
yeah. I know there's one in Charlotte. Which that one I've always been more of a fan of because they have I mean, it's a bigger store, but it
Yeah,
also has a lot more of a selection than the one that was local to us. So I would
yeah.
love to make a trip up there again and do a hunt.
We need to, and we also need to go up to Durham. And isn't
Go to
that
Little Shop of
Little Shop?
Horrors.
Yep, Little Shop of Horrors. She's in Durham, right?
Yep. I'm with you on that one, man. It's been a long time. We haven't seen her in a while because we haven't been able to hit up a convention in a minute. So
Yeah.
sure she's got plenty of good goodies in her store, right for the picking. So
She might
yeah,
get mad at us again.
probably.
All right, man. Well, yeah, let's do this. So I'm gonna go ahead and just start with a question to you. Is what's your favorite subgenre? Let's do this.
Well, this is easy for me because as most horror fans know, when you ask them usually what their favorite subgenre of horror is, they're automatically going to go to slashers, and that's mine. I'm
Hmm.
a huge slasher junkie. I love slashers. I love everything that has to do with slashers. Um, of course, the peak 1981 when when it hit and slashers were so big, and that was the year where they were just. I think it's every month there was a new slasher film coming out that year, which is really remarkable. It just goes to show how, at the height of their popularity, um, what was going on back then. I mean, just one pumping out each and every month is pretty cool. So for me, it's easy. That's the slashers. From me growing up to watching Halloween to me being a Friday the 13th fanboy. I've always been a slasher junkie, even when I was a kid. So, and it still holds true today. So that's my favorite by far.
Yeah, I can kind of agree to that statement. With that, like, you just for some reason, like growing up in the '90s, it just seemed like you weren't allowed to watch what like your parents went out and rented. And I remember easily that my mom renting a copy of Friday the 13th, Jason Takes Manhattan. I do remember, like, I remember sneaking and watching that. I just remember the one that scared the shit out of me was the portal scene.
Oh yeah,
that scene was the one that kind of got to me when it came to Jason. So it was a it was very surreal, obviously, meeting Kane Hodder and getting him to actually sign that specific image. So that's pretty cool. But I remember specifically watching certain ones. Like there was even a couple Nightmare on Elm Streets I remember watching, as a very young child. And that's one of the things that I love about horror films is honestly it's just all nostalgic for me because, I grew up sneaking movies and watching them and ultimately my favorite subgenre is zombies. Um,
Yeah.
I love slasher films, but zombies ultimately takes the cake for me because I've just always, I've kind of feared them, like when I was younger and stuff. But I remember like watching Return of the Living Dead, and that was pretty much my intro to horror. So
Yep.
ultimately, I go back to my childhood on that one. But yeah. So slasher films, we can go ahead and discuss that first if you want.
Nope.
Um,
Fine with me, man. I can talk about that subject all day.
we might just have to do a whole segment just on slashers, huh?
No kidding, man.
Well, maybe we can. Maybe we can go further in depth.
Yeah.
That's the beauty of podcasting. There's so many things that you could do with it. So many
No.
themes.
So many avenues you can go down.
Yeah. So slasher films, what are some of your all-time favorites?
Oh man, there's just so many. I gotta start with the one that kind of started it all for me was of course Halloween.
Mm,
The one that kicked off the slasher boom, I'd say. I mean, there were proto slashers that came before it. There were films that, of course, influenced it, even from the Italian side. I know Giallo's influenced that film a little bit, or influenced Carpenter, specifically Mario Bava. Um, and of course, Black Christmas. That's a movie I wish I would have saw at a younger age, and it would have kind of just shot me in into the subgenre a little bit sooner because I mean when I was younger, I know the first slasher film I saw was Halloween. Um, like many other fans, that was their intro to it. So, but I look back on movies like Black Christmas and you can go back to movies like Peeping Tom and of course Psycho that were the protos that kind of had set the groundwork but didn't really have all the tropes and stuff that slasher films do now or that did in the 80s. But of course Halloween definitely is prevalent and the big one for me. I love, like I said, Black Christmas, of course, is another one that just I absolutely adore. My Bloody Valentine being a big one. That one's just the epitome of setting, which a slasher film has to have a good setting. That one's
mm,
got a perfect one in the mines. Of course, it's got a cool killer with the mining gear on and stuff like that. And of course, it's got really neat kills. I love
yeah.
that they have went back and kind of you know restored that uncut footage to even when we were first seeking out collecting, we got the DVD, and they had just put a lot of those scenes back into the movie that were cut for the longest time. So
Hmm.
seeing it that way for the first time, I never got to see it cut. Seeing that way in an uncut version was really big. And being a Friday the 13th fanatic like I am, my favorite one is part five or part five. Part five is great, but part four is without a doubt my favorite. Um, Absolutely love that film. Love the characters. The I love Jason in that one. Ted White is always going to be my favorite Jason. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, no doubt. I love even movies like Just Before Dawn. I love the backwoods slasher films, like Just Before Dawn. Of course, The Burning. I love The Burning.
Yeah.
That's another one. It feels like a teen camp like comedy movie, but it's in like a slasher format. So you really do like the characters, and you really you root for them and stuff like that. Which in most times, you watch a slasher film, you just can't wait for these characters to die. But the
Yeah.
fact that you go through it with them and they're really really funny, especially I mean that it's got a young George Costanza in it, and he's just hysterical in that movie. Everything he says is just gold. Just really love his character. But I mean, of course, The Burning, like I said, movies like Madman, movies like Hell Night. I love the college theme slasher films like The Dorm That Dripped Blood, Final Exam. There's just so many to name, dude. I mean, there really is. I mean, I just absolutely. There's a time in my life when I'm, collecting and stuff like that. I literally wanted to find every slasher film that was on home media and just collect it and have it in the collection. Every one I could find. So, I mean, I think I've did pretty well. I got a ton. Obviously, there's always still some more out there that you can't really get a hold of, but
Oh
um,
yeah.
yeah, I mean, I really did see for a longest time. I was like, I need to find everyone I can so I can see everyone from that decade, specifically the '80s, because you wanna get every one of them you can in the '80s, man.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, those
80s.
those
Yeah.
are just some of my favorites. There's
Yeah.
tons more. I could throw
Something.
Mutilator on there, Blood Rage. Those
Oh
are
yeah.
the ones that I absolutely adore. Slumber Party Massacre. Man, the list goes on and on, dude. There's just so many good. Another one that me and you saw, like Splatter University. That one was, you know, that one was fucking. That was a great movie night. Just checking that
That was
movie
a
out.
great experience.
That was a really good experience. But
What do they
uh,
call him? Wool.
yeah, dude, there's just so many. There's so many, man. I could be here for another hour talking about different slasher films that I love, but just it's just a couple that I'll throw out there.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like I said, slashers. I mean, it's when you think horror, ultimately, I think your mind goes to, well, at different times. Okay, so like when you thought about horror films, I would say probably in the early 2000s, the late 90s, stuff like that. You would your mind would travel to, um, like slasher films and stuff, and ultimately the icons. Freddy, Jason, Chucky. Those are your icons. So you always kind of just always drifted to those. And so for me, um, Friday the 13th Part 3 is actually probably my one of my favorite slashers. And that's just because, Jason gets his iconic mask. And it goes back to when you think of horror films, you ultimately think of, the icons, and you think of that specific iconic mask. A lot of people think of that mask first before anything else.
Yeah,
So ultimately, like when he got his mask, that's when he became the icon to me. I mean, yeah, paper sack or, potato sack, Jason's cool, part two, but something about when he got his mask, it just kind of, that scene when you see him, first put that mask on and he comes out on that dock or whatever, it's very surreal. Like that, he's the shit.
he is. He's even got that walk. Like after he's done with the kill, he just kind of struts back. He's
Yeah,
just like, I'm the shit.
yeah,
No doubt,
yeah,
dude. Yeah, I love that. I love part three too. Part three is
yeah,
great, man.
yeah. But overall, like, yeah, honestly, like, if I had it, obviously, like I said, zombies are kind of my thing. But ultimately, slasher films, they probably go in second place for me as
Hmm.
far as like my favorite subgenre. But yeah, and what I was also getting to as far as like when you think of horror films, it's almost taken a turn here recently, or I guess you would say modern times. So like I guess you would say now, if you sit there and think of horror films, instantly people think of paranormal films and almost like gore porn or torture porn, it's like the Saw movies, stuff like that.
Oh
It,
yeah,
it almost seems like it's really taken a real mainstream turn, I think.
yeah.
You know.
And even in the last, I want to say even in the last 5, maybe even last 10 years, I mean, horrors seem to kind of take that more psychological approach, and now we're starting to get into a lot more psychological horror films, which is fine by me. I love a good psychological horror film as well. A lot of these new directors are just pumping out some of these really like abstract, really just thought provoking, creepy, just and something about I love like a sense of doom and dread in my horror films. And it seems like the last couple of years, man, these I don't know, man. Maybe I have the same because we're about the same age as these guys pumping these movies out now. So maybe they're just like on the same wavelength as us, and they just want to put stuff out there that the fans really want to see.
There you go. You're back.
No doubt.
I, lo- I lost you for a minute.
Oh, my bad, dude.
You're fine. But yeah, we were, obviously you were mentioning psychological. What's your what how, do you have a preference there as far as psychological horror?
Like I said, the movies that have like a real doom and gloom like atmosphere, and there's a sense of dread. For some reason, I love movies like that. I really love that with my psychological horror films. Um, Movies like, of course, when I think about it, I think about like Roman Polanski films from the early '60s, like Repulsion and Rosemary's Baby, which Rosemary's Baby's a classic. Um, of course, The Shining is another one, and even recently, there's just been so many like movies like The Babadook and
Hmm.
films like Black Coat's Daughter. There's a movie I saw recently called The Lighthouse with it's a Robert Eggers film that's really really good. He also did another good film called The Witch. I mean, there's just so many pumping out now that are just like, wow, they get it. You know what I'm saying? These guys, they use their influences and they kind of not they don't mimic, but they pay homage to them with their output now. So it's really cool to see that. Um, but yeah, man, there's just so many good ones out there now that are getting pumped out. I think horror's taking that trend now where it's psychological and it's the doom and gloom atmosphere, the stuff that I just eat up and I love. I mean, I'm just glad it is coming out now. I mean, we're almost in like a second renaissance of horror right now, where the last 10 years have been excellent, man. Absolutely fantastic for the genre. So I love seeing it, and I hope it continues. I know we've kind of hit a snag with not too much stuff coming out lately, but I just hope it continues into the next decade or so. It's cool to see, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One that actually comes to mind is Session 9.
Oh yeah, that's a great one too, man. Absolutely.
You really opened my eyes to psychological horror. Now growing up and actually there's a psychological film that, well, I mean, I guess you would call it psychological these days because it deals with phobia, but it's Arachnophobia. That was actually a childhood film that I watched at a very early age. And I just remember always, like, after that, watching that movie, I was always like looking around and like little shadows in the room fuck me up because I'm thinking there's spiders or something. But yeah, so that one probably really good for me. And then like I said, Session 9, you kind of opened my eyes to that one. That's a really good film.
It really is, man.
Yeah.
It really is, man. I don't even know why I didn't even mention that, but that's another great one.
That is a really great one. Yeah. And isn't that the first film that was filmed in HDMI, if I'm not mistaken? Is it?
I'm not quite sure actually. That's a
I
good
want to
point.
say I'm wanting to say that's what I heard. I don't know. I don't know if it's true, so don't quote me on that, but that's what I thought I heard though.
Oh, that's something to definitely look into. You got me
Yeah.
kind of curious about that.
But
You said your favorite subgenre, of course, Corey, was zombie films. I mean, what are some of your favorite zombie films?
of course my go-to, I've got to go to it. 1985, Return of the Living Dead, man.
Absolutely, man.
That movie is just so fun, dude. Just, I mean, honestly, like the atmosphere is so cool, because I mean, it takes place in a graveyard and stuff like that. It's just a really cool atmosphere because it's
No,
like foggy and stuff like that. Honestly, like growing up, again, growing up, and I remember watching the Thriller video with Michael Jackson, so that almost really like clicked, those two kind of almost looked hand in hand, a little bit, the zombies and stuff. Um, but I mean, just growing up and admiring that film, as an adult, because as a kid, that film scared the shit out of me. Like I'm not gonna lie, I had
that's
a strong phobia against Tar Man. Like when you first see Tar Man down in that basement, and he's like brains and those eyes are fucking bulging, that scared the shit out of me. I just remember genuinely being petrified. Um, but just like I said, admiring some of the things. So the detail to the zombies was amazing. It was on point. And then on top of it, just like the details to the punk kids was really cool.
yeah.
And not just that. I mean, they really knew that it was like the actors really just weren't acting. It was like they were just a bunch of kids who were friends and they were just there making a movie and it seemed to work,
Well,
you know?
I know watching the documentary that they had a lot of rehearsal time together, so they had a lot of camaraderie going into the film. They just spent a lot of time reading together, and they just built up a morale together, and that really goes to show on screen because they really have such great chemistry together. All
They
the
really did.
That's what that movie is fantastic with the characters. It's got some of the most memorable lines. It's got
Mhm.
I mean, excellent cast of characters that you love every character.
Mhm.
The movie itself just feels so punk and so, just anti-establishment, and it really just shows. And I'm with you, dude. It's one of my favorite zombie films of all time.
Yeah.
I love the shit out of it. It's one of those movies I can literally pop on anytime and watch because you just
Yeah.
get sucked into it, and it's so fantastic. But yeah,
It
man,
is.
Turn of the Living Dead is fantastic, dude.
Well, one of the other things that I ultimately really love about it is the the makeup. Like I said, the makeup is just gorgeous. And then on top of it, like all the way down to the animatronic, like on that table, on that slab, that was really
Nope.
cool. How I mean, the backbone's like flailing around and stuff. It's just so cool. So
It even has spinal fluid coming out of it, which is really neat. I love that they
yeah,
add that touch to it.
it's all about the detail, man.
It's all about the details, man, and that movie just it kills it on all details. It
Yeah.
really does.
So I think you know what my second favorite zombie film is Zombie 2.
Oh,
So,
perfect.
something about Lucio Fulci's Zombie 2 is just phenomenal. Everything about that film is great.
I love the setting on the island and stuff like that. Love that because you normally don't see that too
Hmm.
often in zombie films. So it's really cool to have that setting. And of course, Fulci's zombies are just so memorable and just so iconic. Of course, the zombie from the cover is absolutely iconic. The fat zombie on the boat is iconic. You talk about iconic zombies, and he's got quite a few of them. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
so yeah, I love the Italian zombie films. I mean, it's just it's almost like a guilty pleasure for me. A lot of those. I mean, that movie is legitimately good, but there's some that are really bad that they're like guilty pleasures. You just love them. You
Yeah.
can't get enough of them. So Zombie 2 is fantastic, though, man. And I'm with you too, man. If I had slashers as my favorite, zombies would probably be my second favorite because there's a lot of zombie films I count as my favorite films of all time. So it'd almost be like by default it would have to be second place.
Yeah.
So
Definitely.
yeah,
Definitely. And then there's the classic, you know, obviously George Romero, Night of the Living Dead,
yeah, absolutely.
and then
Dawn
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say Dawn of the Dead, his whole Dead trilogy.
Yeah, Dawn of the Dead, Even Land of the Dead. I love Land of the Dead. It's
Yeah,
such a fun film. We've met Big Daddy. Big Daddy's a fun guy.
absolutely, man. Been lucky enough to meet a lot of people from Romero's films. But Day of the Dead's always been my favorite, man. I love Day of the Dead. Just the fact that no one can get along, nobody's working together, and that's what Romero was showing so well in that film is like it's not the zombies that are breaking down humanity, it's humanity breaking down humanity because they can't trust each other and they can't come to an agreement on anything. And that's what's going to be the ultimate downfall of humanity. And I think it's very prevalent. And I love that. And I think it's shown so well in that movie. That's his pinnacle. I think that was his masterpiece. You know, of course, people say, you know, Night of the Living Dead is the pinnacle and this and that. But filmmaking wise, that movie just had it all. It really did. And it's such a shame that it was that a lot of people didn't get it the love and the credit that it deserved when it first came out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree 100%. Yeah, I ultimately love everything George Romero. Even the one that got shit like Survival of the Living Dead. That was actually the storyline was actually pretty decent for what it
That's another
was.
one. That's another one I remember watching with you. That's the first time I saw it was with you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it was a fun one.
yeah. It's been a while. I got to revisit that one.
So, what about some zombie films that you ultimately hate? Do you hate any zombie films?
Oh man, I wouldn't say there's some that I think are really overrated. Um, and you know, I might stir some feathers, but Shaun of the Dead's not really a zombie film that I always. Of course, I can agree that it's a good film, but it's just it seems like every zomcom that's come out since has to be compared to Shaun of the Dead, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, there's some zombie films out there that are comedies that I actually probably would prefer more than Shaun of the Dead, to be honest with you. And I like British humor, but it's just like I don't know. I just think it's a wee bit overrated. Not saying it's a bad movie. I'm just saying they take it to the extreme when it comes to Shaun of the Dead. But
Yeah, I
every,
can agree. I can agree to that statement. There's another one actually that I don't really care for, and it was more of a I don't know if it was meant to be a comedy or not. And that's the funny thing. I'll hold on before I go further into that. But um, when people sit there and they look at like my collection and stuff, they're like, "Oh, you don't have Shaun of the Dead?" No, it's to me, it's not a horror film. But at that same aspect, like, okay, so I don't have anything wrong or against that film or even like Zombieland. I don't have a problem with Zombieland. I actually enjoyed Zombieland and I just recently actually watched Zombieland 2 and had a blast watching that. Um but I won't own those in my collections and people are like, "Well, why won't you put that in your collection?" And I'm like, "Because it's not really horror, but at the same time, like I've got so I always sit there and say I love sitting down and laughing at this film, but it's a horror film, you know? So
yeah,
like for instance, Cognies versus Zombies. So like I mean that's I would consider that to be a zombie. So am I hypocritical saying that? I don't know, but but yeah.
it's
So
it's that gray area, man. I know what you're saying because especially with Zombieland, I find that much more the tone is much more comedic than it is horror. So
yeah,
when you have that because I look at Return of the Living Dead and I think that's a classic, brilliant horror comedy because you have the right amount of horror and you have the right amount of comedy mixed in. That's like completely even, and you know it's like the pinnacle. That's when I think of like it's Trump, Shaun of the Dead, and all the other zomcoms, if you will. Like that's the pinnacle. So it's tough when you have a higher injection of comedy and horror kind of takes a backseat. Then I kind of like get turned off by it as well. And most horror comedies, in that sense, I do find like when it's just overly comedic and there's not too much horror, then they just turn me off, and I don't even want them in the collection either, to be honest with you. Because I
yeah,
actually love horror comedies, and but it's got to be the right. It's got to be the right amount. If it's skewed and there's so much more comedy in it than horror, then it just turns me off. I can't watch it. I mean, I don't want to put it in the collection, honestly, because it just doesn't feel right. So maybe I'm a little hypocritical as well, man. I don't know, but I do have that same mindset when it comes to those kind of films.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So what do you think about let's talk about The Battery real quick. That's a
The
zombie
Bat
film.
I love that movie, man.
Yes.
Love that movie. Absolutely adore it. Um, First time I watched it, I was like, "Yeah, this is awesome." And then the second time I watched it, I loved it even more.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a great film, man.
Yeah. Honestly, one of the things that I ultimately love about that film is you see two different characters. Okay, so first of all, character building. You know me, I love character building, but for some reason, this film in particular, the character building's so awesome. You got one guy who's fucking gung ho about the zombie apocalypse. He's about fucking, taking these bastards out. And then you got this guy that pretty much just throws headphones on and just forgets that the world exists. You
Yeah,
know and that's what I like about it. I thought that was just a really cool touch.
yeah. And their interaction and the way they play off each other is great in the movie too. They're
Yeah,
really they have good chemistry in that movie, and like I said, and that's the thing about it. If they didn't have good chemistry and that didn't work, then the movie wouldn't be as good. You had to have those two characters have a good chemistry for that film to work, and that's why it works so well. Because I mean, it's character study at the end of the day, and you're following these two characters. If you don't enjoy the two characters, then you're just going to have a miserable time watching it. So the fact that they're really, they really sell their characters well makes the movie so much more enjoyable.
yeah. You know what? And honestly, I want to mention this before we get off the subject of zombies.
Mm-hmm.
But one of my actual favorite zombie films that I haven't mentioned so far is The Girl with All the Gifts. Have
Oh,
you seen this film?
I have seen that film. I saw it when it first came out.
Yeah, I loved it. And here's the thing: is it zombie or is it more virus or correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't it have something to do with plants?
It did. That was
Okay, I guess you would say more of a bacterial
mhm.
infect film,
Yeah.
except these kids could turn into these little fucked up monsters.
Hmm.
Which I thought I thought it was a cool concept all around. It was such a great film.
Hmm.
But I need to revisit that actually. But I remember actually, and again talking to that guy at work, and he was wanting a good zombie film, and I told him about it, and he was like, you know what, I think they just advertised that on Netflix, and he actually went and he watched it, and he came back like the next day or whatever, and he was like, dude, I love that movie. So I mean, you can't go wrong. That's a pretty good film
Yeah.
for what it is.
Yeah.
All right.
One I just wanted to throw out there also, another great zombie film is The Living Dead at Manchester Morgue. That's another fantastic one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a that's a fucking classic, man. But I
That
just want to
is.
put that out there. We can move on.
Just a quick tidbit.
Yeah, it's a quick one. I want to throw that out there.
All right. Yeah, so we covered slashers and psychological and zombies. You want to get into some creature features?
Oh, absolutely, man. That's one I was going to bring up too. Creature features. I absolutely love,
Yes.
um, love the big creatures like of course, Pumpkinhead. Absolutely love with a passion.
Hmm.
Um, the Blob, the Thing, even Rawhead Rex. I love Rawhead Rex. I love the character. Just he's
Yes.
awesome. I mean, me and you both share a love for Rawhead, so but even like the little creature features like gremlins and critters and the ghoulies and stuff like that. I love those films as well. So
Oh yeah.
creature features have always been a favorite.
And oh, go ahead.
Oh
Please.
no, nope, that was it.
Okay. But yeah, honestly, creature features for me, I love them. Um, I remember watching some old ones, and actually, I think my mom actually introduced me to the Blob at a very young age. So I remember watching the Blob, and just that whole like sink scene was amazing.
That seems so gnarly, man.
It is.
Absolutely.
But all the way down to like The Howling. I mean, I grew up at a very young age watching that film and just being so overwhelmed by the fact that they could actually show a whole transformation of a werewolf. And I thought that was just really cool.
That's cool. Hmm.
Even for just an 80s film, they pulled it off.
Absolutely, man. And that was the height of that too when American Werewolf in London came out, and then even The Howling came out. The creature design and the transformation scenes were really really big. And I think Rob Bottin, the same guy that did all the creature effects for The Thing, did the creature effects for The Howling. So
Yeah.
it really shows, man. He fantastic when it comes to that stuff. So I
Yeah.
mean, where his work speaks for itself. But that's actually my favorite werewolf film of all time. I love The Howling.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely
That's
adored.
that's definitely a good one. And it, like I said, I've got a love for Pumpkinhead. I think more so Pumpkinhead 2 than Pumpkinhead, just because again, I watched it at a very young age.
That's
I actually
nostalgia for you, man.
well, I actually got in trouble with that one. And I was actually at a so I snuck it out of my mom's house. I think my mom had rented it, and because I remember it even had like the Blockbuster cover on it and everything. And I took it to a buddy's house, and we popped it in. And the thing was, we told his mom, we were like, "Yeah, we're gonna watch a horror movie," and she was like, "Oh, okay." And the next thing you know, you just Linnea Quigley happened,
Mhm.
and yeah,
How many
that
times
didn't
can
go
you
over
say
so
that
well.
watching a
Huh?
horror film? How many times can you say that watching a horror film? Oh, Linnea Quigley just popped in and she's naked. So
A
many times.
bunch. Yeah, that was funny.
Hell yeah, man.
Uh, and actually, most recent, there was a movie that came out a few years back called The Monster. Have you seen this film?
Oh yeah, dude, the monster's great. Oh yeah,
Yes. Yeah,
that movie blew me away.
yeah, it was really cool. Um, one of the things that I loved about that film, again, character building,
Right?
just so awesome.
Yeah. It's
Thoroughly enjoyed that.
kind of like the Cujo thing, where you have a mother and her child, and they're just trying to survive the impending doom that is a creature or something stirring outside of a car, and they just have to be able to work together and survive. And yeah, it's tense, man. It keeps you on the edge of your seat too. Yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
one, Corey. That's a good one.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So, what do you think? Since we're talking about creature features and stuff, and I know maybe this would be more considered um, like classic monster, but what do you think about classic monster films, or I guess like Universal monster films? Would you consider those creature features, or what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, monsters, creatures, they seem to go hand in hand, and Frankenstein's monster and even the creature from the Black Lagoon, Wolfman. I mean, all those. We're talking about werewolves, and
Hmm.
uh, in that regard, then yeah, man, absolutely. Those are like the first creature features of their time. And I mean, that's another thing. You grow up. I love the black and white. I love the Universal monster films.
Definitely. I
Absolutely
even,
got those in there.
yeah, yeah. One of my, I actually out of the Universal films, what are your? Well, I guess you would say the Universal monster films. What is your favorite?
It's my favorite. Ooh, man, it's tough because I grew up with such a love for those films. Um, man. Oh man, if I had to pick one, that's tough, dude. That's really tough. Um, I mean, I'd probably have to go Frankenstein, dude. I know it sounds cliche, but Frankenstein's the one I watched the most, and I also love Creature from the Black Lagoon too. So, man, that's tough, Corey. That's a tough one.
Sorry to
I'll
put
just
you on the
default.
spot.
I'll just default my answer to Frankenstein.
That's you know what I'm right there with you, dude. Frankenstein, for some reason, man, just you really feel sorry for him. You know, that's the bottom line. Like he didn't ask to be a monster.
Yeah, you're
You know,
sympathetic to him. Yeah,
very.
absolutely.
You know, and then that whole scene where he kills that little girl or whatever, or throws what is he think he throws her in the pond, right, or something. And he's just like he's just like bloop, and then he doesn't understand. He just doesn't
Yeah,
grasp that he just killed her, and and you just have a whole sense of just sadness for him
it
all the way
is.
around.
It's
It really
tragic,
is.
no
It
doubt.
really
It's tragic.
is. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but so what else you want to talk about, man? As far as subgenre.
Well, I know another thing that me and you have in common is our love for giallo films, which kind of you can kind of push it to that's the Italian slasher in a way, but
Hmm.
there's a definite detective narrative to those films where you have a character that's kind of like a fish out of water. He's from a different country. He's in Italy or vice versa, and he's trying to solve the mystery of the murders and what's going on because he usually gets indirectly involved in said murders. So he usually takes it upon himself to kind of figure out what's going on and get to the bottom of who the killer is. And of course, you have your motifs like the Black Love Killer, um, the real I wouldn't say it's there's not there. I mean, there's some that are really sleazy, but for the most part, when you're talking about um, especially films from Argento and Bava, there's a touch of class to them that in the 80s they kind of other Italian filmmakers kind of ramped up and they ramped up the sleaze and
Hmm.
the gore. But even Bava is a great example of more of a classy introduction into giallo. And I think Blood and Black Lace being one of my favorites, which is such a fantastic movie, man. Absolutely fantastic. And of course, even Fulci put a couple out. He got into it with Don't Torture a Duckling and Lizard and Woman Skin and just a couple from his output. I mean, it was so heavy in the early '70s. It almost mirrors the slasher movement of the early '80s. Man, it was the same way for the early '70s in Italy. You know, Argento's Argento's Bird with the Crystal Plumage was big, and then all of a sudden, boom, there was like an output of them, and every Italian filmmaker seemed to be putting one out because it was so hot and so you know so prevalent in those times. So um, that's another subgenre I love is giallos. I can watch a giallo anytime, man. I just get so sucked into the story and just the atmosphere and everything going on at the time, plush like way they lived in the '70s, and I don't know, it's just so cool to watch that stuff, man. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's another one I'm throwing out there. I absolutely adore. And then Gothic films in general. When you're talking about the early Italian stuff, and even the Vincent Price stuff. The movies he made with Roger Corman. I actually watched a couple of those last week. His Edgar Allan Poe stuff was fantastic. I mean, you just get black and white horror in general. I just have such a love for it. Um, it's just such a good aesthetic, and you know, yeah, that's a couple other of my favorite subgenres. And of course, I'll throw body horror in there too. I love a good body horror film.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, like body melt films and even Cronenberg stuff, which I love David Cronenberg, and all of
Yes.
his films are just so prevalent and just so meaningful. He's like on a different level almost. It's incredible what he can put out or what he put out. He doesn't really do too much horror now, but back in the day, in late '70s, early '80s, he just couldn't be touched, man. He was just putting out stuff that was just fantastic. And the Brood, of course, um, Shivers and Rabid, and of course, The Fly, the pinnacle of body horror. I think that's the one people think of when they think of body horror films. They think of his, Fly remake, and
Mhm.
everything that happens to Brundlefly. Like it's just talk about tragic. That's tragic, man.
Yeah.
You feel bad for somebody at the end of that movie when you're just like, oh my god, it's just like it's so sad what happens to that character, man.
Yeah.
That's a movie. It's just hard to watch because it's just like, man, you just feel so bad for him.
Yeah, it was definitely pretty brutal. Yeah.
I don't want to spoil the ending for anybody that hasn't seen The Fly, but I suggest if you haven't seen it, definitely go out and check it out. It's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So you were mentioning body horror and stuff like that. Well, before we get into that, let's finish up foreign films since we're kind of on the subject.
Okay.
Um, so obviously we talked about giallos and our love for Italian cinema, which
Mhm.
is hands down probably my favorites in my collection.
Oh yeah.
Um, I,
Oh, it's
I'm actually I'm actually thinking about getting the whole Italian line from '88 because why not?
yeah,
You know.
right. Because why not? Exactly.
Um, but there's also others out there. There's Japanese horror, and I got a love for Japanese horror as well. Obviously, whenever I'm like movie hunting, and I think you're the same way, you always tend to look for certain spines like Full Moon Productions, Shriek Show, stuff like that, Blue Underground. But ultimately, Tokyo Shock,
Yeah.
and finding titles is almost like impossible at times. Like Rikio is kind of a hard one to find, and stuff like that. But any Japanese horror that you can think off the top of your head that you really love?
The funny thing about me, Corey, is maybe it's more J horror, but I'm not too big of a fan of Asian horror. I love, of course, Rikio, stuff like that. That's more. It just harkens back to movies like Bad Taste for me, where it's just like so over the top. It's you just gotta love it. But movies in the J horror realm, I'm not too big of a fan of. That's one of my, one of the subgenres that I'm not too particularly. I just haven't seen enough of them that really gravitate me to it because they all seem to have the same like, there's this girl with long black hair and she's in white and stuff like that. She's coming at you and stuff like that. They seem, for the most part, they seem to have that one note, and I don't know if they really, kind of change it around. Granted, like I said, I haven't seen too many of them, but I guess it's more J horror in general. Like we're talking about stuff from Japan,
Yeah,
like Ju-on and Ringu and stuff like that. You know what I
yeah.
mean? It's and I don't know, man. I don't know. It never really hooked me in. J horror. Um, that's just one I don't know. I just need to probably sit down and watch more. Um, just really like set aside a day to just do like to just really give it a shot and see what it is. But the ones that I have seen, they've never really made an impact on me for some reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, with that, but yeah, no. So ultimately, like when you watch films and stuff like, and again, this kind of goes back to like new age stuff. But you've seen The Ring and stuff like that. So I ultimately always wanted to go back to kind of originals. So I did watch like Ring You and stuff like that, and then even The Eye. I watched the Japanese version.
That was another
Um,
one.
yeah, and then Pulse. Pulse was a big one for me.
Yeah.
Actually, I prefer the Japanese version over, um, obviously the Americanized version any day.
Yeah.
Um, but I do have one in my collection that I always, when I would go to like Second and Charles, um, I would always see it, and it was always like $2, and it screamed haunted house, but it was called, I think it's called Black House, and it was just always like I always like saw that cover, and I was like, that's just a straight up, ghost type film or haunting type film.
Yeah.
And then finally I just jumped on it, and it has nothing to do with paranormal whatsoever. It's basically about like this fucked up wife who like cons her husband into like chopping off limbs so she can get insurance policies off of him. It's really fucked up, but
That
that's
really
that's essentially, huh?
that really is different.
Yeah.
Not at
But
all
it's
what you were expecting at all.
no, but it's actually got a really great storyline, great concept, and everything else. It is actually a very fun film to watch, and it's not even Japanese. It's actually Korean.
Yeah,
Um,
well, Korean output I really enjoy. And like I said, even the Chinese, like there's some like Chinese horror films that, well, I don't even know if would be considered Chinese horror, but there's a movie called Dream Home, which is like a pretty much a slasher film. It's fantastic, man. It's so good. You want to talk about gore and just gnarly kills, and it's like if you see it, it'll blow you away. But I guess it's more like the Japanese ghost story. Like I don't know. For some reason, I just can't. I don't know, man. It just never gravitated me. I don't know. I know it's very popular, and I know a lot of people love it, stuff like that. But I just don't know, man. I've seen a couple, and just never really been my cup of tea for some reason. But I'd say my least favorite subgenre is probably going to be found footage, though, if I'm being perfectly honest.
really?
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Is it
yeah.
is it a particular film that kind of just turns you off altogether, or what?
It's just that style, man. That steady cam, really fast paced editing style. I just don't, like I said, I just can't keep up with it. It's hard for me. I love a movie you can that does and not necessarily slows down for you, but it kind of just takes its time and it kind of builds up. It's just so fast paced and there's just so much going on. I'm just like if I turn my head for a second, I miss something. You're just like, what happened? You know what I mean? It's just it's the way they're shot, man. Which it's funny because I absolutely love the Blair Witch Project.
Yeah.
I love that movie. Absolutely adore that movie. I absolutely love Cannibal Holocaust, which is what many people consider the first found footage horror film. I absolutely love it though.
Yeah.
Those two are perfect exceptions to that rule, though. Those are two that I absolutely adore. But in general, I'm not too big on the found footage style. And I think more or less is because those two films take their time. They're not so rushed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They really set it, especially with Blair Witch. It sets apart this atmosphere, and I mean it. I don't know. It just draws you straight into it, man. And Cannibal Holocaust is the same way because there's so much atrocity happening on screen that you just get sucked into it. But
Yeah.
those two are like my exceptions to that, man. I absolutely just I'm not a big fan of the Paranormal Activity movies at all.
No.
Never could get into those. That's probably my most hated franchise of any franchise that there is. That's got to be it for me. I
Yeah.
can't. Never could.
Yeah. I could see that. That's a terrible franchise.
It
It's
is,
so
man.
mainstream too. It's
It,
ridiculous.
man. It
But
really just bleeds mainstream to me. I can't do it.
to kind of go against what you're saying about found footage style. Now, I will say, at first, when I first seen Blair Witch, when it actually first came out, I think I actually still have that VHS actually, but yeah, I just, I couldn't get into it that much, and it was just something new, and I think it was something that was kind of way before its time almost. It
Oh,
almost felt like it was way before its time, and I just couldn't get into it. And years later, and my appreciation and love for the genre, I've watched it, now, and I'm like blown away. This movie is actually pretty damn good.
oh,
Storyline's good. Everything about it's good. Even the way it's filmed has a found footage, and I don't have a respect for found footage. That's the thing. I want to find those found footage style films that I can gain a respect for it, but I'm like, maybe I'm just looking at it wrong. I haven't picked up any of the rec films or anything like that, so I can't justify saying that I ultimately hate found footage when I just honestly haven't experienced it enough, and it just goes down to me just honestly not wanting it because watching Cannibal Holocaust, that's okay with me. I'm okay with that's a great movie.
It's
Um,
classic. Yeah.
yeah, everything about that is just great. Um, even Blair Witch, like I said, and I second what you say there as far as like Blair Witch is just hands down good. Used to hate it back in the day, and so before I sat down to watch it, so I watched the Blair Witch as a young age and not having an appreciation for it at all, and then watching. I think I remember watching Cloverfield or something, and that was found footage style, and I fucking hated that movie.
Yeah, I
So
didn't
it
like
was,
it either.
so instantly I was like, oh, found footage sucks ass. Like there's no way I want to ever watch this shit again, But I want to, watch more, and maybe it'll change my mind.
Yeah. And
So
ultimately, to your point, man, me being a huge fan of horror like I am, even me saying found footage and J horror is not my favorite, I still have an appreciation for it. I just when I go to sit down and watch a movie, I'm not going to go to those two particular subgenres and be like, "Oh, I need to pick one of these out to watch." You know what I mean? It's not like I bash them or anything like that. It's just that I just don't actively seek them out to pop in to see because at the end of the day, they just don't hold my interest like a lot of these other subgenres do. Um, I just don't want to make it feel like I just can't stand all the. I mean, there's some really good found footage films that have come out recently that I've seen. Like, of course, a couple of the Rec films were pretty good. There's a movie called The Den that was really well done. Um,
actually, yeah, I've actually got that. Just because I was on a kick there for a long time, you might remember me buying all the IFC Midnights.
yep,
And so, yeah, that's one highly recommend if you've never seen that film, you need to go check that out
good.
because it's
That's good.
awesome.
It's a really good film.
It
Um,
is.
yeah, so like there's of course there's exceptions to the rule, but as a whole, as a majority, the bad probably outweigh the good, and that's where I go to say, hey, it's probably my least favorite because there's just so much bad that you just get like there's the diamonds in the rough. Don't get me wrong, but there's just so much bad in that subgenre that it's just like you really have to really dive in and really seek out the good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so with that, let's talk about so we were okay, so we got kind of sidetracked a little bit. I wanted to get into what you were saying as well as far as like body type films and
Mhm.
so your take on body melt movies.
I love them, man. I do. I just enjoy the hell out of them, man. There's so many good ones out there.
Yeah. Being street trash being number one, I bet.
Yeah, I mean, street trash is so fantastic, man. I absolutely love street trash, man. Um, you can go to movies like Street Trash, of course. There's a movie called Body Melt.
Hmm.
Um, there's another there's another one called oh man, why is the name escaping me? I saw it probably about a couple months ago. Slime City.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Slime City. Yeah. I just had to. Sometimes I lose track of one, but that's another one. Even a movie like Society, you can throw that in there. It's a good little body melt film. Um, especially toward the end. There's a lot of crazy shit going on in that one. You gotta really seek them out, man. But there's some good ones in there.
Oh yeah.
I wish there was more. I wish they made more. Honestly, I don't
Yeah.
think they made enough. They could have made so much more.
Yeah, they could have. They could have. Um so yeah, let's get into so we've talked about several different ones. And here's obviously we were talking about foreign films, and I'm kind of backtracking. I'm sorry, but so foreign films. What do you think about French films? We haven't really talked about French films.
Oh, the French Extreme, man. That's oh man, some of my favorite more modern horror films have got to be the French Extreme, the Fab Five. Oh
Yeah,
man. Yeah. And if I had to, it's tough to rank those movies. I don't even know if I could, man. I know I love Inside.
yeah.
Inside's fantastic. Probably be one of my favorite. Martyrs is just one of those movies. It's such a hard watch, man, because of all the subject matter that goes into it, and um, it's one of those movies you have to be in a certain mood to watch. But at the end of the day, it's still a fantastic film. You can't take that away from it. Um, Them's good. High Tension's really good. Um, and yeah, man, it's hard to rank those five in any particular order. Um, I'd have to really think about that. But how about you, man? I know you're big on the French Extreme too.
Yeah, yeah. I think probably one of my favorites. Obviously, it's them. Them is a great film. Is it them? Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I get the two mixed up all the time between they and them. But yeah, them is a great film. Inside obviously, and then oh geez, I'm trying to think my mind's drawing a blank right now.
You got
Uh, High Tension is hands down the one that ultimately I go to, I think. And it's actually a funny story. I remember buying High Tension and just the cashier. I think I bought it from Second and Charles, and she was like, "Man, you're really messed up."
awesome.
Uh,
She knew it
but yeah,
too. Good.
oh yeah. Um, Frontiers is another great film, though. Frontiers
Man,
was awesome. I remember that scene where the dude's, I think it's either a guy or a woman, but gets his Achilles tendon
yeah,
snipped, and then he just falls forward. It's like, oh, it's so fucking brutal.
that's that's one of those that always gets to me, man. If you nip the Achilles tendon, I always just really I squirm every time I see that. I don't know. It's just the reaction that you get out of, and I'm sure most moviegoers are the same way. They
Yeah,
see there's just like, oh man, it's like nails on a chalkboard. It just completely pulls you off and just kind of grades you a little bit. But Frontiers, dude, I'm glad you mentioned Frontiers because that was the other one, and I absolutely just I never thought to put that into the for some reason, when I first got into the French Extreme, I never thought about putting that one in there for some reason,
yeah,
but yeah, that one is definitely one of the Fab Five for me. When you talk about the five big ones, that's definitely one of them because you have Inside, of course, and this is me trying to do a ranking now. So I would put Inside as number one.
hmm
I would put I'd probably put Frontiers number two,
okay,
and then I'd put Martyrs at three. I would put I'd probably put them at four, and then High Tension at five.
okay.
That would be my ranking.
So, so as far as out of the five for me, my ranking would probably be, um, you know what? Actually, I have a love for Frontiers actually. So I would say that would actually be my number one.
Nice.
And number two would probably be High Tension. Number three, Inside. Number four, Martyrs, and then number five, probably them.
Either
That-
way, man,
that's-
even number five is still a good one. So you can't like either way. You love all five. So
yeah,
I mean, like I said, High Tension's five for me, but that doesn't mean I love it any. I mean, it's a great film. It's just hard to rank those films because they're all so good.
they really are.
I guess it all just depends on what mood you're in.
Yeah,
A lot of them. So
true, true.
yeah.
What about we've kind of visited all over the earth here as far as foreign films and stuff. What is your take on Australian films?
Mm.
There's been a couple out there, Um, one being one of my favorites is Wolf Creek.
Wolf Creek, that's the one that garners a lot, man.
Yeah.
Wolf Creek's good. Wolf Creek's really good. There's even one that I saw recently that I just adore. I love this movie. It's called Boar. It's so good, dude. I loved it. It's got the Mick from Wolf Creek in it,
Hmm.
and it came out not too long ago. And then there's another one called Charlie's Farm, which is it's a really good slasher film that came out of Australia. And I
Yeah.
think, if I'm not mistaken, the same guy that directed Charlie's Farm directed Boar. So
Oh, nice.
yeah, so
I
Boar,
love
as
Charlie's Farm.
matter of fact, Boar's at Walmart, dude. If you go to Walmart and you see Boar, you grab that shit because it is awesome. It's a really, really awesome film.
Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't oh, go ahead.
No, I'm just saying, like, you can't miss it. It's got like a really white, a solid white case with a giant ass boar on the front of it. So you really can't miss it, honestly, if you're looking around browsing.
Okay. Um, what about Storm Warning? Isn't Storm Warning?
Storm Warning's good too. Yeah, it's from the Dimension Extreme line because I remember going back. I was trying to collect all the Dimension Extreme DVDs I could because I mean, of course, Inside was in that group, and then Storm Warning was in that group as well. So I would go through. That's another thing. Like when you go through and try to find all the MGMs you can find and all this and all that. I would go through and try to find all the Dimension Extreme that I could. And I know a lot of them are hard to find now, but Storm Warning was a film that I did check out and I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. Kind of felt like an Outback, not wrong turn, backwoods kind of hillbilly movie. You know what I mean? Kind of
Yeah.
had that same feel.
Yeah.
I liked
Yeah.
it though.
I had a huge blast with that. It was a such a fun film.
Yeah,
But
Australian horror is good, man. There's even some that are coming out recently that never have, never saw the light of day on home media before that are really good. I picked up I can't remember what it's called now. Severin put it out. It's an Australian film. It's marketed as a slasher film, but it kind of wasn't. It Man, I wish I knew the name of it. It's been a while since I saw it, but I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it, and it's the first time it's ever really been released on home media. So
okay.
yeah, they even have some good stuff from the early days, from the 80s and stuff like that. It's just unfortunately, us being North Americans, we haven't really seen too much of it because sadly enough, a lot of it hasn't been put out until recently with these companies like Severin and stuff putting the stuff out. So
Yeah.
I think the more you dive into Australian horror, the more you'll fall in love with it.
Yeah. There's I've definitely from what I've, seen the past couple of years, I really liked what's come out of that country. And then, like I said, ultimately, um what's that? You just mentioned that movie. Charlie's Farm. That one there. And actually, if you remember when we met Bill Mosley, um he was telling us he wouldn't give us the title of the movie, but remember he was like, I asked him if he was working on anything, and he was like, "Yeah, I'm actually working on a movie with Kane Hodder right now. It's in Australia," and that was the
Yeah,
film.
yeah,
So I thought that was pretty cool.
hell yeah, dude.
Yeah. So what other subgenres do you want to cover, man?
Oh man, um, we've talked a lot about splatter films are fun. Another subgenre I absolutely love because the more gore and stuff you throw at the screen, the more I'm going to be interested in it, of course, because I love that kind of shit too.
Yeah.
Talk about splatter. You talk about Herschel Gordon Lewis, of course, and all his films. I know back when we first started watching movies together, when we first started having movie nights, we watched a lot of Herschel Gordon Lewis stuff, man.
We really did, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think I kind of introduced you a little bit to some of the earlier stuff as far as for splatter films like 2000 was it 2001 Maniacs
So one meeting. Yep.
and you know shit I'm trying to think Color Me Blood Red.
Blood Red.
Um,
Is it a gore?
of course the godfather of them all, or I guess you would say the grandfather of them all, but um, Blood Feast.
Blood Feast. Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, in which have you ever seen the sequel to Blood Feast? I got to throw that out there. Have you seen it?
Um, I know I have it, but I don't think I've checked it out.
Oh, dude, it's so like it took such a comical turn. There's like one scene where this like asshole cop he's after. So basically, it follows the the killer's grandson, and he comes back in town, and he opens up in the same place, and they're like, yeah, we know that you're back at it, just finishing your grandfather's work or whatever. And he's like, no, I would never do that. And he's like got blood just covering him. It's so terrible.
Well,
No,
now I
it's
now I have to watch it.
yeah. Oh, there's so much nudity too. There's a lot of nudity in that film.
Oh yeah, I do have it, and that's why I do have it because it's a Shriek Show DVD. Okay.
There's Shriek Show, yeah.
So
So
yeah.
that's why I picked it up. It always used to really aggravate me because the so I don't think they're both Shriek Show. I think the first movie only came out on Something Weird
Yeah,
Films.
something weird put it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that always kind of bugged me.
Yeah. That happens a lot when you're collecting like movies in a line or something like that, and you get like different lines popping up. Like, yeah, it's like, well, it'd be cool if they were all universal, but I understand why. You get it.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
definitely, definitely. And what about you, man? I mean, you got any more that you really love and that come to mind that we haven't covered?
I mean,
There's,
we talked about everything, honestly, I think. Or I mean, obviously we haven't talked about everything yet, but
oh no,
um, yeah, one that kind of stands out to me that I kind of want to talk about is animal films as well. And one that obviously comes to mind is Day of the Animal.
oh yeah, the Nature Run Amok films. Yeah, love that shit, man. Day of the Animal is a great one, dude. Day of the
Yeah.
Animal, excuse me, is a good one.
Yeah, you kind of introed me to that film, and I'm trying to think of fuck, what's his name from Airplane?
Leslie Nielsen.
Leslie Nielsen. That guy was
Yeah,
such an asshole in this movie.
he really was, man. That's one of his roles where he portrayed a dickhead so well. Like it was just, and it was so funny because so against his normal character that he normally plays. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yep.
What are your thoughts on the cannibal subgenre?
Oh man, I could talk cannibal. Of course, of course. Let's go ahead and hash this out. Green Inferno. I know you want to talk about potentially, right? Green Inferno. There's a lot of hatred towards this film, right?
Yeah.
What's your thoughts? And please don't hate us, people. We love cinema all together. So if you have special thoughts on it, leave a comment down below and generate a conversation about it.
Yeah.
But Tony, what's your thoughts?
Well, with Green Inferno, it's different because you have Eli Roth taking his love for the cannibal subgenre, and you got him trying to emulate it, but he injects his normal kind of douchey characters into it, so it's like so different. It's like it can't really tell what it wants to be. It doesn't really know if it wants to be like a farce kind of cannibal film or just if it really wants to be a serious cannibal film because there's some serious stuff in it, and then there's just some over the top comedy in it. So you just don't know. Like you watch it and you're like, I'm feeling this way, and then it hits you this way, and it's just like it's so uneven. I it's one of those films that I kind of I kind of like when I first watched it, I was like, "Oh, this is fun," and this and that. And then every time I watch it, that really kind of resonates with me. And I'm like, I don't know what he was going for. I don't know if he wanted to pay homage to. I mean, because Eli Roth, if you know him, he's got a really extensive knowledge on Italian cinema in general.
Mhm.
So even that, it was his love letter to like the Italian cannibal subgenre. So I just wish he would have took it more seriously and he would have made a more serious film because the comedy kind of takes me out of it in some places, you know?
Yeah.
I really like at the end of the day, if he would have made it a straight like homage to Italian cannibal films and kind of reared back the comedy and stuff like that, I think it would have been a lot more prevalent and a lot more not mainstream, but it would have been appreciated more in the horror community. But it's tough though too because people, as soon as Eli Roth puts something out, people automatically hate it. He's just one of those guys. So I
Yeah.
don't know. What do you think about it, man?
Honestly, Green Inferno, it did something for me, but then again, it also didn't do something for me. So, honestly, as a fan, especially of cannibal films, you know, ultimately, I wanted to go into this loving this film because he has a pure love for cannibal films, So I knew right away there was going to be homages and and similar scenes and stuff, but ultimately, yeah, I don't think that I really got that. I mean, there was some stuff where it was like, that could be kind of taken from Holocaust, and stuff like that. Um, but then, like, you got this. Okay, so the storyline that I like about, I guess you would say what I like about this is the storyline. And
Yeah.
basically, what it comes down to is you have this cannibalistic tribe who's done nothing wrong, and they've lived their life like this throughout their life, and then
Mhm.
you've got these kids that have been captured, and obviously they're being tortured and shit like this because they think that these kids were the ones that were tearing down the woods or the forest and shit. Um, so they're ultimately just kind of hacking them away. But so basically, by the end of the film, it almost makes the main character, which I forget her name, but it's Eli Roth's wife.
Yeah.
Um, but she's, ultimately no different from them because she leaves somebody basically to die. So
Mhm.
in reality, she's no different from them, the killer tribe, you know?
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah. It's
that's
definitely one of those endings that people question, and that's another reason people don't like it because they don't like the ending.
that's
So
it. I like the ending because it showed that she can be just as fucking ruthless as this tribe can.
yeah, absolutely.
Um, but going into some of the other cannibal films, obviously Cannibal Holocaust we talked about,
Mm.
um, and just our pure love for that film as well. Um, I have a squeamish side to when it comes to animal brutality, so
Yeah. That's the
I
one thing that turns off a lot of people to the Italian cannibal subgenre is that they did kill, a lot of animals and they actually filmed it. Um, so it definitely it'll definitely turn, which is cool that companies like Grindhouse when they put out the Cannibal Holocaust Blu-ray and stuff like that, they have an like animal cruelty free version that you can watch, which is really cool that they give you that option. So if you are really squeamish to that, you can just kind of watch it with those scenes cut out, and it kind of, you know, makes it a little bit easier to sit down and watch that stuff. But ultimately, at the end of the day, what they did with the animals, when they did film and kill and they ate the animals, or I think the people that in tribes or something actually ate the animals, so they weren't killed in vain or anything like that. But it's still the point that they were still on camera and they were killed is still kind of it's kind of like kind of a little dark, but it was a different time back then too. So
yeah. Yeah, I could go all day long, and of course, Umberto Lenzi's Cannibal Ferox.
Fair, yeah. That one is just batshit insane.
Yeah, it is.
It's crazy.
Um, but yeah, I think that was another one you kind of opened my eyes to, actually. But I had fun with that one. That was a different one. Um, and then there's films that are little softer, like Man Deep River,
Hmm.
Cannibal Man. Am I missing some, Tony? You
No,
want
like,
to list off some?
yeah, you got Eaten Alive is another one.
Yeah,
Mouth of the
yeah,
Cannibal God. Just a couple more. There's a ton, man. Honestly, uh,
there is.
yeah, there is. They're still pumping out new ones. Companies still, you know, get rights to them, and then they'll put them out and stuff like that. And you'll be like, oh, another Italian cannibal film. Oh, that's interesting. That's cool. You never really think that they made that many, but they actually made quite a few. I
Hmm.
mean, granted, how big Cannibal Holocaust was, I mean, it's understandable once, how many Jaws ripoff movies did they make? I mean, they made a ton because, Jaws was so big. So,
They're still coming out with them.
oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
House Shark.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That shit happens, man. That shit happens. But they've made quite a few Italian cannibal films. So
Oh yeah.
it's definitely a subgenre. I don't know if it's for everybody, but it's tough to recommend Italian cannibal films. Let's just say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's true. So we talked about animal films, and you bring up a good point. We didn't talk about shark films.
No,
No, we didn't talk about shark films.
sure didn't, man. The animal, the nature, excuse me, the nature run amok films, which, even then you could think of like, you know, movies like Deadly Eyes, which is a movie that me and you absolutely adore.
I love that movie.
The killer rats that are dressed up like, or the Dachshunds that are dressed up like killer rats, and yeah, that's a good
Blat-
one.
You can blatantly see that those are little dogs running
Yeah,
around.
they're little dogs in rat costumes. It's adorable.
It is
You
cute.
just love it. Yeah,
Just
you
the fact
love
that
it.
these people are like dying and they're screaming and they're being licked to death by dogs.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. Absolutely. Movies like that, and the Nest is another one. Slugs is another one. There's some really really fun like
Oh,
nature run
what
amok
was that?
film.
What was that movie that we watched together with that asshole baboon?
Oh, Shakma.
Shakma.
Yeah,
Dude, that was a fucking fun movie.
that movie was a blast, man. That's another one I was going to mention too. Shakma was fun. It's
Yeah.
such an obscure little movie, but it's just so much fun. It really is, man. Like a bunch of like nerdy people in a it's almost like in a I think they're in like a school, but it feels like they're in like an apartment complex or something with all the floors and stuff. No, it's a school. It's like a lab or something in a school or something. But there's just so many different avenues they could go, and this giant baboon, this baboon is chasing them around and just picking them off. It's hilarious, man. It really is. It's so much fun. But yeah, that's another one, dude. That's that yeah, we had a fun time watching that one.
That was a
That
great
was,
one.
that was another good movie night. Yeah.
Well, do you have any more that you wanna get off your chest?
All my notes I wrote down. I just skimmed through a couple because I probably didn't want to do a 3 hour show, so
Yeah.
I just kind of jotted down a couple here and there, which I went through just about the ones I wanted to on my notes. So, but if you have any more, man, that you're really really fond, or how about ones that you're I didn't really get the chance to ask you ones that you're not too big of a fan.
As far as like subgenre ones that I'm not a fan of, um, I don't know, dude. I really don't have. Like I said, I can't definitively say that I'm not a fan of like found footage style because honestly, I've never given it a chance. Um, ultimately, I love pretty much everything. I can't think of anything that I just blatantly hate with a passion. Um, I don't know. I mean, I could. There, there's one movie in particular in my collection that I ultimately hate, and I won't get rid of it, but I hate it. But um, and there again, holiday movies. I'm big into. But this one I was sold as it was a holiday movie, and it was just garbage. But it was a Christmas Nightmare. The case
Yeah,
just looked so cool.
I knew you were going to say Christmas Nightmare, man. When you said holiday, I knew that was coming up. I remember your disdain for that movie. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's another thing, that holiday horror. Like, you take advantage of the holiday, like, Christmas horror and, Halloween horror, of course. Just the different themes and stuff like that. That's another thing I enjoy. I enjoy when horror films, especially around Halloween, man. Because, like, peanut butter and jelly, man, they just go hand in hand.
yeah,
Halloween and horror, you know, mix the two, and you have a real effective horror movie set on Halloween. It's just like you can't get better than that, man. You really can't. And then on the opposite spectrum of that, when you combine it with Christmas, it's even more interesting because it's two things that shouldn't go together that really end up going well together. So, you know, it's interesting in that vein because even when we talk about slasher films, there's a lot of good Christmas slasher films out there. So
oh yeah,
yeah, like of course Black Christmas, Silent Night, Deadly Night, the list goes on. There's so many good ones, but when you combine that to when you combine Christmas and horror, it's really interesting. It's really fun.
yeah, definitely.
Love the aesthetic of this really clean holiday mixed with the horrors of whatever you throw at it. Because I say Christmas time is one of the most depressing times of the year. It's really you know people get like really depressed and bummed out and stuff like that. So in that regard, you can kind of pull the two together and make a really good effective horror film, um, which people have ended up doing, and it actually turns out really well. So there's a lot of good character studies around Christmas horror too, which is another thing that's really interesting. Like a movie called Christmas Evil. I don't know if I can't remember if you've seen that, but that's a really good character study horror film, not necessarily a slasher film, but it really is effective because of how just crazy this dude goes and how much he really thinks he's Santa Claus and how much he is punishing the bad people and really trying to do well for the people that are good. And it's psychological in that sense, man. But it's a really good watch.
Yeah,
But
I honestly I haven't seen that film. I need to check it out.
yeah, it's really, really, really good film.
Okay. Well, you you ready to land this plane, as Frosty says?
Yeah, I'm ready to land this plane, man. Let's land this Boeing.
All right. Well, folks, you've been listening to the Midnight Monster Corner podcast. I'm your host, as always, Corey, and like I said, alongside me was my good pal Tony, and you can listen to this episode and others on our YouTube channel. You can also like, share, subscribe. Check us out on Facebook. We do have a Facebook group. It is a closed group. If you ask nicely, you can join. We will let you in. And there we honestly have fun sharing memes and just having a good time bashing people. If conversation starts up, I'm sure I'm gonna get some hatred towards Green Inferno. um, but yeah, just check us out and keep us going. And one thing that I wanted to bring up, Tony, is and as of now, we've actually got 21 subscribers on YouTube.
Nice, dude.
So got a milestone, man. And then we got 32 followers in the group, which is awesome. Um, so I'm really proud that everything's coming along, and people are getting us out there. And like always, guys, just keep us going, and keep checking us out. We're here for you guys, and
Absolutely.
also in the, huh?
Oh, I was gonna say absolutely, man. That's much appreciated too.
It really
It,
is.
it definitely is.
And one thing that we want to start doing is, you guys, obviously we do reviews. Head over to Facebook and, let us know what you guys want to review on, and we'll do one, and especially an in-depth review. Um, but with that, Tony, you got anything else you want to add?
Oh no, man, that was perfect, Corey. Like I said, all the people that are in the group and stuff like that to follow and like and all that stuff's huge, man. I really appreciate that, and being along for this ride has been awesome, dude. I really appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to future episodes. And if anybody's got any recommendations on a more in-depth review, like Corey said, man, definitely throw it our way, and we'll knock it out.
Definitely. All right. Well, later, guys.
Later.